Greetings everybody, welcome to Educational Policy and English Language Learners and our Week 3 review and coming up on Week 4. So we are talking about foundations in bilingualism and bilingual education. So we have discussed sort of the different program models that are out there for English language learners, including bilingual education and dual language education. And we will be continuing to use that as anchor content as we talk about multilingualism in the United States. Just a couple things related to Blackboard. I'm going to head on over to Blackboard here. You'll see here on the home page that I have added Module 2, which has all of the necessary readings for the upcoming weeks. Those are in there, and then the rest are in the books that you already have. Over here I have a Week 2-3 expectation, which is a video link. It's actually a YouTube page, and that's where I will put a wrap-up of one week and sort of looking forward to the next week. I will do that on a weekly basis and post that Monday or Tuesday of each week, so you can look forward to those for updates. Also, during the week, I prefer to use the announcement tool, so I recommend that you would check that daily. That'll give you updates about everything going on in classes, any changes, etc. So I'm fearful that even though I've put down the email notification for announcements for those to go to your email, I'm not sure that you're all getting them, so I'm just going to ask you to regularly check announcements. Discussions, we did have one this week as part of your assignment. You introduced yourself, thank you, and then we also had our academic thread where we talked about English language learning and bilingual education and responded here. So just as a reminder on timing, I realized this week was very unorthodox with the shooting and the weather, and it also being the beginning of the semester, so I was lenient. But you need to post one post by Thursday of a given week that a forum or a discussion is planned, and respond to 2 to 3 classmates by Sunday at 1 o'clock. I do the Sunday 1 o'clock cutoff for your benefit so you can get that done and get the rest of your week started, or enjoy the rest of your weekend, however you'd like to frame that. So just be more timely about that. I'm not going to be as stringent about that this week, but that's just an FYI for you. Also, I have updated the syllabus. There were some typos, errors in there, etc. So any changes that you see will be highlighted. I had some dates mixed up. Your next assignment that you need to turn in is a journal entry, which is due on the 9th of February at 1 o'clock, and I will get that up for you shortly on Blackboard so you can see the rubric for that, a description of the assignment, etc. So, and again, the journal assignment is just for just with me. All right. So you'll see other dates there. You'll see also the assignments are more specific about a specific timeline, date deadline, etc. So that's throughout. Alrighty, so I wanted to point that out to you. That is on Blackboard, and it is, if you go back to the home page, you will see it here under Course Syllabus, Revised. Alrighty, so back to our PowerPoint. And expectations. So this week we talked about additive bilingualism versus subtractive bilingualism. Additive bilingualism being that 1 plus 1 or 3 plus 1, adding another language is not a bad thing. It is not cognitively confusing. It is not a deficit to one's learning. And so having extra languages or another language is really having another form of identity. And so because it's a part of one's identity, we need to contain it in positive ways. Whereas subtractive bilingualism is the whole notion of taking away a language to learn a new one, which we know is not possible, but is often thought about among monolingual folks that you do need to take away one language to gain a new one. We did spend most of the time talking about the different models that Thomas and Collier describe in their seminal longitudinal study of the effectiveness, the efficacy of different program models. Here they are here. And we did talk about dual language education being the most effective model for English language learners, where you have an equal amount of English speakers and an equal amount of Spanish speakers starting in kindergarten together and learning upward with one another, and that group of students, both English speakers and Spanish speakers, have a high level of biliteracy in both languages and perform very academically well, usually are outperforming other monolingual English speakers. But there's not much evidence of this happening in Indiana, although it's taking off in other parts of the country. We did also take a look at these models here on the bottom, which demonstrate that they have very low efficacy, as far even below where they begin, as far as children making progress in English and, more importantly, making progress in academic language learning. And so one of the things you see is that ESL pullout, which is one of the most frequently used models in Indiana, has the lowest degree of effectiveness for academic achievement, yet is the most pervasively used. And then you'll see this one, the next one up there, on occasion, ESL through academic content. And then here you'll see some use of the native language, or the L1, but it has a quick focus on transitioning them into English-only instruction and having them being supported by an English language learning program for a very, very short period of time, thus the early exit. So you can see the continuum here. One of the things we talked about is that what's problematic in the field of English language learning, one, it's a young field. It's really only been around as sort of a research field of scholarship for the last 20, 25 years, and in the Midwest even less so. But as far as research is concerned, what we do know is that the names of these particular program models are not consistently understood and applied across the board. So for instance, dual language education in Indianapolis may look really different than dual language education in California. But where the distinctions are even more divergent is really with these ESL models, ELL models down towards the bottom, where you will see ESL pullout described in one way, but it's practiced in another way, or maybe they call it ESL self-contained, maybe they call it ELL cluster group. It can be named a lot of different things. So when things are named differently, it's hard to capture them from a research perspective to look at the longitudinal effectiveness. But I think too, one of the things we hit upon is that why is it in the field of ELL that the language is ever shifting, and that particular things in schools, the discourse remains static and unchanged. And with English language learning, you can think back to when they were English as a second language students, English as speakers of other language students, where they were the Spanish speaking students, where they were the language minority students, where they were the limited English proficient students. So there are, several iterations of that term, and you can see by changing the term, it may have been an effort to define the population more descriptively, more specifically, or it may have been an effort of trying to rescue it from its stigmatized context and making them and illuminating them differently. But in doing this, my first question would be, did we ask the community what they thought about how they would be called and named and described? That would be one thing. But the second thing is it an effort of changing the language to give them more access, because we are being their advocates, and on their behalf, by pushing this, we are changing our language so we can give them greater credibility and access. And has that been effective? So, because from a research perspective, it can be complicated to navigate through what program model we're really looking at. So the next thing we did as a class, we took a look at these video clips, and these were sort of promotional tools for the most effective type of bilingual education, two-way bilingual education, or dual language education. And so we analyzed this, and we took a look at the different mechanisms that the promoters of these programs were using. And so I sort of listed them there. These videos talked about parent choice, that your child will have the Spanish language, that it's good for your brain, it will eradicate poverty, all sorts of really, really big claims, and some small claims to convince families that this would be a good idea for their children. I did talk briefly about defamiliarizing devices, which is taken from literary theory and also critical theory. And this is using a strategy to make maybe the unfamiliar familiar, or to making the unfamiliar strange, so we can begin to examine it. So one of the strategies these videos use is humor. How do we use humor as a means to engage people in difficult conversations about how they feel ideologically about multiple languages? And so that's something that I wanted us to really think about, is that do we use defamiliarizing devices as a way to have uncomfortable and difficult conversations? This is a tool I use in professional development with teachers, is to use humor as a means of talking about difficult ideas and difficult concepts. Alrighty, so next week in class, come prepared with the Orfield and Sunderman article about No Child Left Behind and the flexibility waivers practiced and implemented by states. I want you to pay particular attention to how that flexibility has impacted English language learners. And as you're reviewing that, I know that you read it last week in your readings, but because we're going to talk about it more specifically in class, I wanted to read this paragraph to you from a book by Tyack and Cuban called Tinkering with Utopia. It's a great book, A Century of Public School Reform. And here's a great paragraph. Not all reforms are born equal. Some enjoy strong political sponsors while others are political orphans. But even reforms with strong supporters do not always become embedded in the schools. Outside forces shape the course of school reform, but schools are also, in some respects, autonomous, buffered institutions. Educators have variously welcomed, improved, deflected, co-opted, modified, and sabotaged outside efforts at reform. So here we see the localized reality that something coming from the feds to the state government, to the school district, to the school building, to the classroom, all of those many, many layers, it becomes diffusely and differentially enacted. And so how do those reforms become additive for some and perhaps subtractive for others? So we'll be talking about that next week at the beginning of class, and then Marshall will take over and lead us in a discussion about the American English varieties. And so you're responsible for looking at Finnegan chapters 3 and 4. And something to be thinking about is how accents impact our perceptions, but also our projections about ourselves and projections onto others. All right, that's it for this week. Have a good one. We'll see you next Monday.